Wholesalers and its types. Hi, I'm Bill Carmody, and today I'm going to talk to you about wholesalers and their types. So first of all, what are wholesalers? Wholesalers are essentially middlemen. Wholesaling is the selling of merchandise to anyone, person or organization, other than the end customer of that merchandise. Wholesalers represent one of the links in the chain along which most goods pass on their way to the marketplace. As intermediaries between producers and consumers of goods, wholesalers facilitate the transport, preparation of quality, storage, and sale of articles ultimately destined for customers. So let's talk about the different types of wholesalers because they're not all the same. The first is merchant wholesalers. These are firms engaged primarily in buying, taking title to, storing, and physically handling products in relatively large quantities, then reselling those products in smaller quantities to retailers, industrial, commercial, or institutional concerns, or other wholesalers. So merchant wholesalers are what most people think of when they think about wholesaling. You buy in bulk, and then you sell it up in smaller parts. And sometimes a smaller part is still bulk to a different wholesaler, a smaller wholesaler. But merchant wholesalers, they take a receipt of all of the goods and services and they hand it off to others who actually are going to do the end purchasing. The second is agents, brokers, and commission merchants. These are independent middlemen who usually do not take title of the goods in which they deal, but instead are actively involved in negotiating other functions of buying and selling while acting on behalf of their clients. So this is a very interesting version of wholesaling, which essentially is there's a negotiation that's happening without actually taking possession. So think about that. So a wholesaler that can actually broker a better deal would be very interesting to, for example, a retailer. If they could get better rates or better pricing, then they would go through that particular agent or broker and be willing to pay their fees because they're actually saving money on what they would normally order through a different process. So that's a way that wholesalers can actually not take possession of any goods and still make their own profits. And the third is the manufacturer's sales branches and offices. These are owned and operated by manufacturers, but are physically separated from manufacturing plants. They're used primarily for the purpose of distributing the manufacturer's own products at the wholesale level. So even the manufacturers themselves can start getting into the wholesale game if they so choose. And so you have a lot of different options here. The wholesale functions have a whole bunch of things they can be doing. Number one, offering the goods of a product offering the goods of a producer to resellers in appropriate quantities. So one of the jobs of a wholesaler may say, hey, these are all the different resellers out there. I'm going to make sure each one of them has the supply they need at the time they need it. They could be providing wider geographical access and diversity in obtaining the goods. So for example, if a wholesaler notices, hey, this particular market isn't getting this and there's a high demand for it, they can see how they could actually take the products and move it into that market, even without doing the end retail selling. They're just selling it to that particular market because they know that there's a particular need. The third is ensuring and maintaining quality verification with the goods that are being obtained and resold. So one of the reasons why someone might buy from a wholesaler is to make sure that they're on the hook for making sure that the quality of the product's being delivered. So if you don't want to work directly with the manufacturer, but you know that the wholesaler is good for any damages or if there's any spoiled product, then what that does is it creates an insurance plan for example, a retailer who buys through a wholesaler and holds the wholesaler accountable for quality product that's being delivered. Could also provide cost effectiveness by reducing the number of producer contacts needed. So essentially, you can see by streamlining your operations, you don't have to negotiate with multiple parties. You can have one wholesaler that takes care of an entire part of what you're buying from. Offering ready access to a supply of goods. So maybe that's one of the main things is you just want to have access to all the goods and services that you want to be offering. So you're working directly with that wholesaler to make sure you constantly have that channel of the things you need that your consumers end up buying. Assembling and arranging goods of compatible nature from the number of producers for resale. So saying like, hey, all these things fit together, so I'm going to work with these wholesalers to come up with a suite of products that I'm going to be selling. And then that basically makes sure that the products are complementary. And then you don't have to actually worry about sourcing all those products direct from the manufacturer. You're working with specific wholesalers. Also, minimizing buyer transportation costs by buying goods in larger quantities and distributing them to smaller amounts for resale. So think about just the cost of moving goods and services around. By streamlining that process, you can working with one particular wholesaler, you can actually reduce some of your own costs and expenses. And lastly, working with producers to understand and appreciate consumerism in the production process. So that's the other thing that wholesalers do really well. Wholesalers actually have their ear to the ground. So they're listening for what is the need, and they're looking at things holistically. While a particular retailer, for example, might be looking at a region and say, here, in my zip code, in my area where I serve, this is what the needs are of this particular community. But a wholesaler is looking a lot larger. They tend to be looking at much larger territories. They're seeing things at a much different level. So as somebody who's more regionally focused, you can see a lot of great information coming from the wholesalers, and then that can actually influence some of your buying decisions. So you can see there's a lot going on with wholesalers, and they can add a tremendous amount of value to the ecosystem, but they're also looking at sort of playing their part. So everybody in this particular ecosystem has a part to play. By knowing what the wholesaler role is, it actually helps you see where the value is being created and where are the profit margins that you may want to be continuing to negotiate as you get smarter and smarter in the work that you're doing, either directly with manufacturers or with other retail networks.